Stalina Works and Bangra Works, was put together in a little town called Bretton Woods by 744 delegates from 44 countries in a discussion that took 3 weeks.
People, welcome once again to our weekly edition of Politics Analysis. But as usual, before I proceed, this is the best time for you to pause the video, go subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so, give the video a thumbs up which helps to show the video to more people, activate your notification bell to get notified of any of our new videos. Thank you. Now, let's...
Over 90%. Now the Maastricht Treaty speaks to 60%. And Rogoff writes about 60%, and the IMF and the World Bank use 60%. But that was in a world that was not encountering a polycrisis moment. And the reality is that if you ask countries to continue to go to 60% in a steep trajectory, you are going to kill the body politic, you're going to kill the capacity of the country to fuel growth or to sustain itself. It is no different from your body losing £5 a week, £3 a week, £4 a week. You need to have a sustainable level of reduction if you are to ensure that the social institutions do not implode. Because we can bring back down debt overnight, but we cannot rebuild institutions overnight. We need also to recognize that this is as valid a moment as the Jubilee moment, and this is a moment for debt cancellation for the least developed countries of the world, the ones who get idle money, because to ask them to put debt upon debt upon debt is to choke them. And therefore, there is no valid reason why we are not having this discussion when you've gone from climate crisis to pandemic to Ukraine war leading to inflationary pressures, and indeed even the actions of the Inflation Reduction Act in the US. The developed world chose to be able to have excessive amounts of quantitative easing to ease their population. And their actions have now led to us having to face increased interest rates and increased difficulties and increased cost of living. That cannot be just and fair. And therefore we need to be able to right-size it and to go. I know that my dear brother, Nana, President of Ghana, is here, and I hope he will speak to the role of the credit rating agencies, which in one fell swoop can take a country from standing erect to putting it on the ground. It is wrong, it is unfair. And the Bridgetown Initiative is fundamentally about fairness and transparency and a reform of the governance systems that continue to be the shadow of an old imperial order. But it is also about recognizing that there can be no division between climate and development, as I said this morning. It is a false narrative. We don't say only eat proteins and don't eat vegetables. We do everything. And therefore, to say that we can only focus on climate, we might get through the climate crisis and die from a pandemic, or get through the pandemic and die from a terrorist incident. The reality is that the world has to have mature, adult-like conversations. And the principles that we need to have undertaken are not rocket science. They're within our capacity so to do. And I'll stop at this stage because I'm conscious that I've had an opportunity to speak already, and I really want to hear the others. But on these issues, I haven't gone into the just industrial strategy for the Global South or the other things that are necessary, but there's enough there. The biggest issue leaving Paris is going to be whether we can overcome the domestic politics and the geopolitics of the moment in order to scale up the multilateral development banks. I believe, as Ilan will show, the private sector money can be unlocked. But the private sector money cannot replace long-term development money. If the European Investment Bank recognizes that the time has come for it to give 30-year loans, as President Hoyer announced to us, with a 10-year moratorium, then surely middle-income countries can get near IDA-like terms, 50, 60-year money to deal with the polycrisis moment that we find ourselves in. The UK took 100 years to repay its debt for World War I, and Germany had all the benefits of being able to have its debt service capped as 3 to 5%, 3 to 4% of its GDP in order to rebuild Germany after World War II. We are people too, we are countries too, and we deserve the similar treatment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Do you want to introduce?
Go ahead.
Okay. It's difficult. So, President Akufo Addo, you are the chair of a group of countries that are massively impacted by climate change. You have chosen to stand up and react, as we said, by mobilizing the international community around your Accra to Marrakesh agenda, but also by working with donor countries, such as Germany and France, to co-construct innovative insurance mechanisms against climate risk. Could you please share with us your vision?
Thank you very much, and I'm grateful for being made a part of this important panel. My understanding is that innovation is not merely about new technologies or instruments, but it's also about how we can respond creatively to new challenges and forge new approaches for development. It's obvious the damage that the pandemic, the conflict in Europe, in the Ukraine, have done to our economies and societies in Africa. It's also obvious what the monetary tightening policy, which has been led by the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank, has also done to our productive capacities and capabilities on the continent. So there are some obvious solutions that we are enjoined to take. The first is ourselves, improving our capacity for self-reliance. And that can only happen if we improve radically our own domestic resource mobilization, i.e., how we can strengthen our tax systems in such a way that we can have the resources increasingly internally to invest in our education, to invest in our health system, to invest in our infrastructure. And in so doing, to create a situation of cooperation at the regional level between tax agencies at the regional level that will allow us also to put a halt to the significant, I say more, significant is not a good enough word, to the huge resources of our continent that are taken away through illicit means. We've had figures that have been given to us by Thabo Mbeki and the committee that he established. We're talking about 88, 89, $90 billion worth of resources a year. If we have a situation where the cooperation between improved and empowered tax agencies work, we can make sure that as much of those resources are retained within the continent as possible to increase our self-reliance. And then secondly, we're talking about reinventing new instruments. Mia, in her presentation, has talked about some. Debt for climate swaps, debt for education swaps. These are instruments that have an obvious benefit for both us and for those who are our creditors. And for us, it is giving us more fiscal space and therefore improving again our capacity to do things for ourselves, and at the same time making it possible for us to have relations with our creditors that are not either aggressive or offensive. They will get paid, but they get paid by making it possible for us to invest in our own climate actions, which can only improve the stability of our countries and our economies, and making it possible for us to grow those economies. And in that process, of course, people will get paid. The third important aspect of this is also encouraging regional cooperation. We have a plethora of multinational, regional institutions. African Development Bank, the West African Development Bank, the various regional economic communities, Afro-Exim Bank, which has just held its 30th anniversary celebrations in Accra. The coordination amongst these institutions is not the best, and we need to encourage them to work together in a more effective and systematic manner. It cannot be that global multinational organizations, IMF, World Bank, find it relatively easy to cooperate and work together, but the Afro-Exim Bank and African Development Bank are not able to do so. They should be able to do so, and we have to insist on them being able to do so, because in cooperating and coordinating their activities, inevitably more money will be made available for us to use in this big struggle against the climate emergency. So these are some of the broad areas of concentration that we have to. Obviously, there are other matters, Mia mentioned them, which we're having to raise global attention to. The intervention of the rating agencies in our development. Not so long ago, barely 18 months ago, Ghana was the darling boy of the bond markets in the capital market. Suddenly, as a result of rating downgrades that were taken, we became shut out of the capital markets. And this is being done by people for whom there's very little accountability. Nobody's able to hold their feet to the fire and find out exactly what is it that motivates them, what are the basis upon which these rating agencies work. We need to be able also to focus on that. But I think that above all, the forward thing is making sure that we ourselves, especially on the African continent, are in a stronger and better place to determine our own future. We have seen that the dependence on foreign capital is both costly and risky. It is not in our control, and it means that at any stage the rug can be pulled from under our feet. We've seen it recently. We saw it over the pandemic struggle when suddenly it became impossible for us to have access to vaccines. Fortunately, the response of some of us on the continent has been to create our own technology for making vaccines ourselves. And I think that obviously is one very positive outcome of the pandemic, which we need to develop. But I am extremely focused on the measures that we can do to improve our own self-reliance and reduce as much as possible. It's impossible because we are all on one planet, we live in one globe, but to reduce as much as possible our dependence on outside sources to finance our development. Thank you very much indeed. Thank
you. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Maintenant, je vais passer au Président Charles Michel. Europe.
Precisely, President Ruto, William, what is your view about your situation and your expectations, your demands vis-à-vis this global institution, and how to fix the situation in your country and the continent?
Thank you very much, Macron, to call us to this meeting. I'm told it was How Dare You conference, but in any case, we are here. Let me just speak to this in two ways. Number one, I have had my sister Kristalina and Bangra, and we have excellent relations with the World Bank and IMF from Kenya. And these people have been incredibly of assistance, and we sincerely appreciate it. But I am also aware that both Kristalina and Bangra have a job to do, and they have people they report to, called shareholders. And they don't have the final word. The final word rests with somebody else. And that is why we are almost all of us speaking the same language, because we seem to be on the same corner. There are people who are not sitting here yet they call the shots. Now, we have a situation, and let me speak from the perspective of Kenya, our continent in Africa, and the global south. We need emergency liquidity. We need debt relief. We need urgently new money, with urgency, with scale. That's our situation. How are we going to get that in the current situation? Listening to Guterres this morning, we get development resources 8 times more expensively than others. We have inadequate resources, and it takes forever to access it. So, how do we, how do we make meaning of this summit that my brother Emmanuel has put together? Our position is that if you want to get debt relief, emergency liquidity, and new money together, let us live here having agreed on one thing, that, like Guterres has said, let's look for 500 billion new money. But if we are going to distribute it the way we did SDR, we will end up with nothing. SDR, we ended up with $33 billion in our continent of 1.2 billion people. Europe, with 450 million people, ended up with 5 times what we got. You heard it this morning, not from me, from the UN Secretary General, that we got 13 times less as Africans as compared to Europeans, because the whole architecture, and by the way, it was fair by the architecture, the current architecture of the financial system. But it is grossly unfair when you are looking at fairness. So, what are we saying? Our position, good people, is we do the following. Let us agree that the money we are supposed to pay for the next 10 years as repayment of debt, let us convert it into a new loan that is 50-year loan with 20-year grace period, so that you don't have a problem with your AAA rating. You can continue to have the AAA rating, but you don't have a problem with your shareholders because you haven't given away any money. You've just changed the structure. And we get both liquidity, we get it urgently, and we can develop our countries. For Kenya, for example, we pay $10 billion every year to service our debts. If I had $10 billion every year for development in Kenya, instead of paying debt, it would make a huge difference. That's all we're asking. We're saying, let's have something that is practical so that we live here, that next year, I don't have to pay $10 billion to pay debt. It will have been rescheduled. I will pay it 20 years from now, and I will have 30 years to pay that money. I will make that money available for roads, for health, for water, for education. It will make a hell lot of difference. We will have done something with this conference. We can discuss governance. We can discuss reform. We can discuss transformation of our multilateral development institutions. That will take time. We are talking about the debts that we already have. They have already been assessed. They have all the things, all the rigmaroles have gone through. That's why we already owe. So we are saying, let us take either 10, 15, 20-year debt that we would have paid for the next 20 years. Let's have that money to grow our economies. It will make a whole difference. That's number one. Number two, let us be deliberate about climate financing. Those are the two things I'm going to ask. Let's be deliberate about climate financing. Since we agreed in 2015 on emissions, that we reduce emissions by 45% by 2030 and net zero by 2050. Are we moving anywhere in that direction? No. What has happened? Since Paris 2015, developed countries, they have tried because they have resources. Europe has come down 20%. OECD countries have come down 12%. But what has happened with the rest of the world? Emissions have gone up 37%. Net, we've gone up, the whole globe, we've gone up 17%. And last year, we spent $950 on fossil fuels. We only spent $500 billion on renewable energy. It means the journey towards net zero is not going forward, it's going in reverse. So what do we do? Because we have to agree on what to do. Our position is that there is a contest between national interest and global good. And in a contest between national interest and global good, national interest wins. Because we are politicians. Macron is a politician. And in politics, your constituency comes first. That is why we have not been able to get the 100 billion promised in Glasgow. Because every politician goes home and says, oh, you know, there's a global problem called climate change. We need to get money from you guys to go and sort out that problem. So the people of their country ask them, how is it our problem? A global issue? Why do we have to raise money to go and sort out a global issue? We run into trouble. So we need a new financing mechanism. We need a new global financial institution. It is not possible, I dare say, to sort out a global problem using national institutions or institutions that are subject to national interest or institutions that are subject to shareholder interest. How do we do it? Let me conclude. How do we do it? This is our proposal. On fossil fuels. We only spent $500 billion on renewable energy. It means the journey towards net zero is not going forward, it's going in reverse. So what do we do? Because we have to agree on what to do. Our position is that there is a contest between national interest and global good. And in a contest between national interest and global good, national interest wins. Because we are politicians. Macron is a politician. And in politics, your constituency comes first. That is why we have not been able to get the 100 billion promised in Glasgow. Because every politician goes home and says, oh, you know, there's a global problem called climate change. We need to get money from you guys to go and sort out that problem. So the people of their country ask them, how is it our problem? A global issue? Why do we have to raise money to go and sort out a global issue? We run into trouble. So we need a new financing mechanism. We need a new global financial institution. It is not possible, I dare say, to sort out a global problem using national institutions or institutions that are subject to national interest or institutions that are subject to shareholder interests. How do we do it? Let me conclude. How do we do it? This is our proposal. There are already 4 proposals on the table. My good sister here from the IMF and others have said we should explore the possibility of what she calls, I think, carbon, no, not carbon credits, carbon, the proposal you made to G20, where they're saying the least developed countries pay $25. Yeah, carbon price flow, right? They've said let's make a proposal. $25 for the least developed, $50 per ton on carbon, and 75. Assuming that we even agree, and by the way, we are ready from the global south, we are ready from the continent of Africa to pay our part. We do not want to be given free lunch. We want to pay. Everybody should pay. Emitters should pay. Consumers should pay. The global south should pay. The global north should pay. Everybody should pay. If we go that direction, we should be able to raise, even if we use the $25 per ton of carbon, we should be able to raise $870 billion every year. One proposal on the table. Second proposal on the table. European Parliament have already passed the FTT, Financial Transaction Tax. And they have said they will raise in Europe $60 billion every year. If we globalize that tax, because this is not a European problem, this is a global problem. We also want to pay financial transaction tax in our continent, because this is not a North versus South problem. We have been engaged in an unnecessary contest between the North and the South. Climate change will consume all of us. Yeah, so we better deal with it globally, all of us. So what am I saying? I am saying let us globalize financial transaction tax. How much money will be raised? Will be raised, according to the European Parliament, $650 billion every year. Let us explore the possibility of aviation fuel tax. Let us explore the possibility of maritime fuel tax. Collectively, this whole regime, that is global, you know, because if we continue the finger pointing and the blame game, we won't get anywhere. We need a mechanism that brings out win-win. If we put together all these mechanisms, we will end up with close to between 1.5 trillion and $2 trillion every year. If we securitize it, we will be approaching $9 or $8 trillion every year. It is the money we need, because assessment requires that for us to meet the 2030 45 reduction and net zero by 2050, we need to invest $9.2 trillion every year. We will be approaching that number. So we need to sort out this in 2 ways. We sort out with the MDBs what we can get for our development. And we have told you how. We sort out climate change using a universal, global mechanism that is not subject to national interest, that is not hostage to shareholder interests, where all of us contribute, because climate change is a global issue and we need a global approach, global finances, and a global institution for us to sort it out. Finally, is it possible for us to achieve this? I dare say yes. How? Let me give you 2 examples. The UN Charter was negotiated by 50 countries in just 2 months. 2 months. The institution where Kristalina works and Bangra works was put together in a little town called Bretton Woods by 744 delegates from 44 countries in a discussion that took 3 weeks. We have many months before you come to Nairobi for the Africa Climate Summit. We have 3 months. It's a long time. We can put this together. We have many months before the next COP28. I am sure we can hammer out an agreement.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Politics Analysis. Hope you did enjoy the video. Once more, kindly subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also activate your notification bell to get notified of our new videos. Also, if you have a suggestion of videos that you'd like us to talk about and analyze, feel free to make your suggestion on the comment section and we could take your advice. Thanks for watching. Until the next edition, from me, from here, it's goodbye.